Hello everybody, it's your friendly digital technology librarian, Christy here. We've reached another Friday, so of course I have another Film Rec Friday ready for everybody out there. So, it has been a hot second since I was last in front of the camera, what with summer reading programming being so crazy and awesome, but I am back and I am super excited. While I was prepping for today's video, I looked through Kanopy's recently added listings and I was absolutely thrilled to discover something. A particular franchise is suddenly all over the listings. I have never seen so many listings from this franchise available through Kanopy before, and I think people are going to be really, really pleased about it. Anyway, I'll give you a 4-word phrase as a hint, and that phrase is Space, the Final Frontier. Unless you've been living under a rock for the last several generations, you are probably at least vaguely familiar with that phrase, and it's, of course, from the iconic franchise Star Trek. It's also a phrase that's really resonated with generations at this point of science fiction fans. Star Trek has meant so much to so many people, and it's a franchise that's still going strong. I think at this point we're up to 12 individual series, and that's not counting all of the spin-off books, the toys, the TV series, like the films. I mean, 12 individual TV series. That's wild, and that spans over half a century. Like, there are not a lot of franchises that last that long. I mean, there really just aren't, and I think that really says something about the content that you'll find within Star Trek. So whether you are a diehard Trekkie or you're just someone who's familiar with, the pop culture monolith that it is, I think you will find either a Star Trek title or a Star Trek adjacent title that will definitely pique your interest and that's worth checking out, because again, there are so many things that are related to Trek that are now available through Kanopy. It is really, really impressive. And I'm just going to run through a few of the biggest offerings so that you are maybe spurred to either check out those particular titles or just sort of take a look through the listings and see what else you can find, because again, there really is something for everyone. Okay, before we get to the specific recommendations, I just wanted to remind everybody that all of the titles I'm going to mention today are available to you entirely for free with the use of your Milan-Berlin library card, and these particular titles are going to be available to you via our Kanopy streaming service. So the first couple of recommendations are the most recent film adaptations that J.J. Abrams was behind, and those are Star Trek from 2009, Star Trek Into Darkness from 2013, and Star Trek Beyond from 2016. So in the 2009 Star Trek, it's really a reboot of the original series. It kind of acts as a prequel to that, but it also takes place in an alternate reality. So what's great about that is you really don't have to have much of a familiarity at all with the original series, because it pretty much stands on its own. It's just an excellent science fiction adventure, albeit with a ton of lens flare. I will say J.J. Abrams loves a lens flare. But it is really exciting. It's also quite well cast. Chris Pine plays Captain Kirk. And the first film really sort of establishes him as this young man who is struggling to find his own within the fleet. And he really, really discovers relationships and friendships with other people who are also part of this team, and it sort of establishes later patterns. Yes, of course, you have ties to that original source material, but the acting in this is really, really solid. I mean, in a way that I think modern audiences would really, really appreciate and enjoy. You lose a little bit of the fun kitsch factor that you get from the original series, but again, it just doesn't really compete in any way. I appreciate that so much. Like, I grew up with seeing reruns and syndication of the original series. That was what we would see a lot of the times, and my dad was definitely a Star Trek fan. So I grew up with those actors and those characters, and I at no point felt like this was any kind of a betrayal. It was definitely an homage, because that's a very, very frequent feeling for a lot of like reboots, I feel, is that, you know, the new version doesn't do justice, but I totally think this does. I 100% think that this is something that adds to the universe as opposed to just playing off of it. Um, and again, I really appreciate the fact that they're quite standalone. You don't need to have the context of like all the other series that have come before. These are movies that you could just pop in and enjoy. So you can watch it with someone who's never watched any kind of Star Trek at all, or you can watch with a ride or die Trekkie. And I think both groups will definitely find something to enjoy about all three of those adaptations. I personally really love the first two movies. I really, really like the acting in both of those. And the acting in the third is great too, but I do think that the story is slightly less well paced. Still really engaging, still really interesting. Beyond is definitely worth watching. Like that, the trio of those films is absolutely fantastic. But I will say, I think the two first films, the first and the second film, are much stronger. So if you were only going to watch one, I think you would still be happy and you would still have like a fully contained storyline, but the others really flesh it out. I was also delighted to discover that the original series films 2, 3, and 4 are also available on Kanopy. I have no idea why Star Trek, the motion picture, is not on there, and it is quite frustrating, but you can check out the DVD or Blu-ray from us via CleaveNet. So if you are interested, 100% recommend it. These ones are definitely movies that I think being familiar with the original TV series certainly helps a great deal, especially the second film. I think you really have to have the context of relationships with the characters to find the impact. But if you are a Star Trek fan and you have not watched these in a while, this is a lovely way to refresh. Again, I'm one of those people who grew up with the original series. So for me, the original films have a very special place in my heart, especially Wrath of Khan. And so I think it's great that these particular movies are available as options. It's also like a really great gateway into sort of discussing how, even though there might be like a very large gap in time, because the series ended just 3 years after it started in the 60s and the 70s. So there was a huge amount of time when these actors did not see each other, did not work together. And the fact that they were all able to sort of sink in again, I think that's always a really, really fun thing to talk about as far as Star Trek goes. How true did they stay to the characters? What kinds of things shifted? Was it something that needed to be done? What does it add? Anytime we can talk about like big pop cultural icons in a way that's a little bit academic, and the impact it has on like pop culture history, I think is a really cool thing. And it's nice when a fandom can be really honestly relevant. And with Star Trek being built and designed thematically the way it is, I think those kinds of conversations are always worth having, just because of Gene Roddenberry's mission, you know, in the first place. So yeah, definitely check out the original series films if you have the chance or have any inclination. Again, they are available for free on Kanopy service as well. So I also discovered that the first two Star Trek: The Next Generation films are also now available to stream. And those would be Generations and First Contact. So I think, along with a lot of other science fiction fans who are my age in your 40s, while I absolutely appreciate and adore the original series, in main part because my father watched them, it was something that we sort of like could bond over, and for like the nostalgia factor alone. But the Next Generation cast and crew, those were the people that I grew up with. Captain Picard, Data. I mean, these are characters that I can still remember phrases from like key episodes that like really, really spoke to me at the time. And I can still tell you like tons of the just storylines that I grew up watching and then watching in syndication afterward. So being able to pop through and see like the movies that was spun off of the series is really, really cool. And they were also like entertaining films. I will say I much more appreciate the Star Trek The Next Generation series than the movies, but you know, sometimes you just want something that's self-contained and short and not a massive time commitment, because to go back and rewatch the entirety of The Next Generation, that's a good chunk of time. Plus, again, these two are available for free to stream on Kanopy. Like a couple of hours and you can knock out a film. That's nothing really. I can put it on while I'm cooking dinner. So yeah, if you are a Next Generation fan and you want to revisit this cast and crew, definitely opt into watching Generations and First Contact again. They're both solid films in the franchise, and it's always fun to see Captain Picard on screen. Okay, my next recommendation is one of those titles that I really do think someone who's not even invested in Star Trek might be really interested in, and that is the documentary TV series The Center Seat, 55 Years of Star Trek. Now, I think that this TV series originally aired on the History Channel in 2021, and hopefully that will sort of tell you why I think anyone might be interested in this one. So not only do we get an incredible chronicle of the history of Star Trek, but we also get to hear about what was happening in the real world at the same time that some of these episodes were airing. And this is the entire franchise we're talking about. So from the late 1960s, so it started the Star Trek, the original series started airing in 1966, all the way up until, of course, 2021, because that's when it aired. And it is wild when you see the connections and the correlations between storylines that were covered in this, you know, kind of outrageous science fiction show, and related that to what was happening around the globe at the time. There also, if for people who are diehard Trekkie fans, like, there are so many little tidbits of information and anecdotes that I'd never heard before. And I've read tons of books. I've watched a lot of documentaries about this. I've watched so many interviews with different cast members from different series. And there was still so much more to learn. And a lot of it was just little anecdotes about behind the scenes things that were happening, different production value tidbits, and then also just some like fan moments, you know, like Will Wheaton is one of the people that talks quite a bit about the history of the show. He's obviously one of the talking heads whenever you go to any of these conventions or you watch footage of any of these conventions. Not only was he Wesley in The Next Generation, but he also just happens to be one of those figures who's very articulate about the importance of Star Trek within pop culture. And, you know, he offers so many really cool insights. There was a lot about Gene Roddenberry that I did not know that they put in here as well. Little tidbits about how Lucille Ball was incredibly invested and really pivotal in the original series ever even having a chance to air. And this is a documentary that flows almost like fiction, just because it's fast paced. So many of the actors that they interview and the behind the scenes people are so engaging. They're so very much fans of their own work, of their work and other people's work that had come before. It's always great to hear from the original cast and to hear what they think of subsequent series, but it's also really exciting to hear how actors of those subsequent series still are absolutely enamored with that original cast. So yeah, whether you are a big fan of the franchise or you're just somebody who loves history, I think The Center Seat is absolutely something that you should check out. Or even just a fan of like television history in general, because it, again, was such an iconic franchise. Okay, my last set of recommendations are all actor documentaries. Your mileage may vary with these depending on how much you love these performers, but I think all of these films are really very much worth a watch. You've got 2023's William Shatner, You Can Call Me Bill. 2016's For the Love of Spock, The Life of Star Trek's Leonard Nimoy. 2019's Woman in Motion, which is Nichelle Nichols' story. And then 2015's To Be Takei, actor and activist George Takei. I have watched and enjoyed all four of these documentaries, and I think they all have a place within the franchise universe. William Shatner is such a character. It's always fun to hear him speaking in his real voice. Again, he is very much performing William Shatner at this point, I think, but it's always a trip. I love his interviews. They're always very, very entertaining. And this is, a full-on documentary all about his life. You learn more about other roles beyond just that of Captain Kirk. You really get to see, what he has tried to do and what he wants the world to know him as, how he wants the world to remember him. And it's pretty much a 9-decade career. So it's pretty awesome to be able to see someone who's seen so many years in front of the camera, and then obviously like the handful of years before he was an actor. But it's quite a fun ride. My personal favorite of all of these documentaries is For the Love of Spock, the Life of Star Trek's Leonard Nimoy. I will say it's probably the artsiest of the documentaries. It's a little bit more serious in a lot of ways, but it has so many insights to Nimoy as an actor, the way typecasting affected his career, his relationship with his family, and his relationship with other actors within the series as well. How things can shift over the course of decades, how people can go from being very close to being, frenemies, to being absolute enemies, to coming back together at the end of the day. And it's quite a beautiful film to watch. So this one for me is like the absolute must see. The other one I definitely think is really, really cool and a little bit outside of the more pop culture recommendations would be Woman in Motion, which tells of Nichelle Nichols' relationship with NASA and how she helped to sort of build this recruiting program that resulted in, eventually 8,000 of some of the best and brightest in the nation becoming astronauts. And it's just really, really wild to hear people who were active in actual space science at the time and hear how they talk about, what the process was and how it was such a daunting task to find new voices to be part of the program. So definitely worth a watch. And George Takei is always entertaining. I always find him to be another really interesting character. There's a lot of really heartfelt material within To Be Takei, and you really get to see his interactions with fans. That one's really, really fun to be a part of. So yeah, this is another one that is highly recommended. So as you can see, Star Trek, very, very well represented on Kanopy. Highly recommend you check out all of the listings. Just do a quick search for Star Trek and pretty much all of the titles will pop up for you. There are some that I just didn't mention just because of time, but honestly, you will find something that you will enjoy on that list. If you happen to have any recommendations for Star Trek film series, documentaries, please pop those in the comments. I'm sure everyone would appreciate hearing more offerings. If you happen to have any recommendations for themes that you'd like to see us cover, definitely pop those in the comments. I would certainly be interested in seeing those. As always, thank you so, so much for joining me, and hopefully I will see you next time. Bye-bye.